Hey, everybody. This is Matt Ferry with Tennessee Young Democrats. I'm joined today by some fellow Young Democrats, and this is part of our new live stream. Top of the agenda, Tennessee Young Democrats live stream, where we talk about various issues here in Tennessee involving young people and anybody of a certain age. But today we are joined by Luke Arnold, who is Deputy Director, Advocacy Director for TEP, Tennessee Equality Project. Did I get that right?
Close enough. Deputy Director of Advocacy, but, it's a long title anyway, so.
Well, it's an impressive title, so I don't want to mess it up. So thank you for joining us today. And we're also joined by Eric Patton, who is the LGBTQ caucus chair for the Tennessee Young Democrats.
Hey, everyone.
Is just a policy wonk and an all-around Democratic powerhouse. Yes, you've done some great work in this state, and I wanted to chat with y'all today about the set of bills that are nicknamed the Slate of Hate bills that are going around in the State House and the State Senate right now. And as we know, there is a bit of a history in that, and we'll get into that. But there is, how many bills, Luke? There's 10 bills?
10 from what I've seen. I think Chris Sanders might have a little bit more. He's the executive director who I report to all the time. But as far as I've seen, 10 bills we're tracking at this moment.
We've got 10 bills. And, they always try to position these things as, these are for the safety of the people. But these are discriminatory bills. They target vulnerable people, and they're meant to do harm to LGBTQ youth, and especially if you're a rural LGBTQ person, you already got the deck stacked against you. Years ago, my friend did a research project about healthcare access in rural areas, as it pertains to LGBTQ families, and it's even if you get that access, you might have a doctor who might discriminate against you. There's all kinds of things that might affect you. So all these bills are wrong and are terrible, but we want to kind of discuss them and discuss kind of the history of this. But Luke, you want to tell us a little bit more about these bills?
Yeah. So as Matt said, there are a lot of hateful ones out there right now, but some of the ones we're looking at most right now, I'm going to just go over the ones that we've been seeing. So there's an anti-transgender student athlete bill, which essentially ties a student's gender to their original birth certificate. It's specifically scoped to middle school and high school sports. And one of the things about this one is it's passed the Senate on March 1st, and it's heading to the House floor sometime soon. But essentially, it's going to hurt our transgender student athletes. The second one that unfortunately passed through the House K-12 Education Subcommittee today deals with requiring schools to accommodate those against cooperating with the transgender students. So essentially what it does, it forces public schools to make accommodations for people who don't want to use a multi-person, gender-specific restroom, changing facility, or sleeping quarters. Another one, so we have two more that are coming before subcommittee this week. So that means they're going to be up for a vote and move on to the committee if they end up passing. One of those is House Bill 1182, which would require businesses to warn customers if they have trans-inclusive bathrooms. This is going to make restrooms less safe for our transgender community and also lead to aggression with these progressive, inclusive businesses. That's up before the House Public Service Subcommittee tomorrow. And then another one is the criminalization of gender-affirming care for trans youth. This prevents healthcare professionals from making the decisions they need to make for these patients. And it's just not actually what we need to see equality advanced in the state. But with that being said, those are the ones we're looking at most, and they're the ones who are up right now. But just going down the list of all the other ones we have a bill that would allow state employees to completely opt out of training if it conflicted with their values or religious or moral beliefs. This bill is very broad, but we are looking at it and we're thinking it's going to undermine LGBT inclusive training sessions and seminars. And this is going to open us up to liabilities. Moving on, we have a definition of marriage bill. Now, while this is scoped towards marriage licenses right now, we're thinking it could be manipulated down the line to possibly be changing the definition of marriage or something along those lines.
Right.
It's had no movement yet. Another one we have, and this is specific with LGBT curriculum, we have one that would require parent notification before talking about LGBT issues or teaching it in any classroom. This is so problematic because we've seen it in the past, just where they're essentially trying to take away any conversation about the LGBT community. Similarly, we have a Don't Say Gay bill, like an updated version of that would censor LGBTQ content in public school textbooks and instructional material. And it basically just prevents the state from talking about these issues. We also have another anti-transgender bathroom bill. That one's pretty straightforward. We've been through this before. And the last one that I've seen is kind of talking about, like, it would tie LGBTQ plus policies as a religious-based policy. So if you promoted LGBT issues, it would be illegal and you wouldn't be able to do it since it promotes one religion over another. Luckily, that one doesn't have a House sponsor yet. So that one is something to worry about more in 2022. But I know I talked a lot about all these, but that's kind of where we stand with the slate of hate. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you for that, Eric. Let me ask you, and we're joined now by George Boyington. Hey, George, how you doing?
Hey, Matt. Thank you for putting this together. This is really great.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You do a lot of policy work yourself, and we want to hear from you here in a second about the work that you're doing and your thoughts on these bills. But Eric, let me ask you a question real quick.
Sure.
What's the real purpose of these bills?
Oh, goodness. I love answering this question because it's so fun. The real reason behind this slate of hate is there's a couple. So first and foremost, his name is David Fowler. He runs an organization called the Family Action Council of Tennessee, and he is making six figures a year running these kinds of bills, getting his buddies in the House to run them. He used to be a member of the House. He stepped away so he could do this kind of garbage. It's basically so he can get a check. Like, at this point, like, the numbers are not on his side. The numbers, if you look at the polling data released last year, Tennesseans are still good with gay marriage for the most part. They are pretty trans-friendly considering that it's a southern state. The public is not with them on these bills. They are running these to get checks cut to them from religious fundamentalists who really have no desire to do anything good with the state other than bully LGBTQ people. So, no, there's no good for these bills. They are just what we do because we need checks from the religious fundamentalists and making it look like we're, being mean to queer people.
Right. I mean, I tend to think that they pass these bills to kind of distract from what their, true agenda is. Like, this is kind of red meat for their base. And it shows them that they're working on stuff, but they're not really doing anything, because I tend to think that when there's some corporate, money there, or in this case, there's some money that could be funneled into some ultra right, conservative Christian groups. They tend to fall over backwards to do that kind of stuff. But everything else, healthcare, education. We're not fully funding education. We're not particularly interested in providing health care to rural residents in Tennessee. There's so many problems here in Tennessee that they could be working on, and they are just not interested in any of that stuff. So, George, you work a lot on the legislative side on this. You work for I'm very sorry to ask you this again. I think you work for a think tank. Maybe I'm wrong about that, exactly who you work for, but would you tell me a little bit about the legislative side and maybe about the implications of these bills, the human and financial implications of them?
Oh no, absolutely. I don't work for a think tank. I serve the Democratic Party at the national and at our state youth caucus levels, and I'm also special assistant for government affairs, legislative affairs, and policy for an elected constitutional officer, Melvin Burgess, here in Shelby County, Tennessee. So I do track the legislature as part of several positions, and I also, do some outside lobbying. So I have a presence, and in that, of course, with the Tennessee Young Democrats in that capacity, I'm part of the. I'm not sure what we're calling it. Our state LGBT caucus chair, Shane Bilberry, he has a name for it, but we've got a really good work group together of a lot of the best and brightest millennial minds trying to stop these issues. And, we're sitting in on meetings, we're Zooming on meetings, we're talking to our legislators, we're working this out at every legislative avenue that we can, in addition to the grassroots. But one thing I definitely wanted to talk about, I for sure know the issue's been introduced and opened and discussed. But and Matt and everyone else, you're not wrong about the motivations. I definitely agree that it's red meat for the base, and it keeps the dollars flowing, and it lets certain constituencies who feel negatively towards our LGBT community. It gives them some feeling that they're being represented. But unfortunately, that's not even.
Oh, cut out on me.
Sorry, I cut out there. So that's not even a majority of constituents. They care about things.
Oh, what was it last part?
Yeah, I'm sorry. They care about things far more substantively, like health insurance, health care, wages, the issues that are life and death. Literally, these who can use what restroom, and who is a real person, and who's 3/5 of a person, and that kind of thing. These aren't 2020 issues, but they do keep a certain segment of the base energized. They do keep certain dollars flowing, and there are a lot of segments of the Republican base, unfortunately, that aren't. While these aren't their top issues, they're not actively opposed to them. So what we've been doing is we've been working to try to highlight the cost of this. And federal government spends $34 billion a year in Tennessee. And if we're to violate any portion of the Civil Rights Act, we're not eligible to receive federal funds. No organization that violates the Civil Rights Act is eligible to receive federal funds. It's the Biden administration's interpretation, as embodied by an executive order issued yesterday, that LGBT persons are protected by the Civil Rights Act and by the federal government. So this could cost us $34 billion. Now, if we're mirroring what happened in 2016, then the Federal Department of Education could withdraw 17. That's what the napkin math looks like on how much money we get in education spending here in Tennessee from the federal government. We could lose $17 billion if the whole federal government doesn't step in. And that's just in education monies alone. And we already, to your point earlier, we don't fully fund our education systems, even according to the state funding model. So to lose $17 billion or 2/3 of education spending, I don't know where that would put us, but is it really worth it to decide, that you're superior by saying that you can use a bathroom that other people can't use? I don't see that. But of course, getting that message to legislators and school districts and all types of other local governmental entities, and trying to make sure that they're opposing, even if they don't morally oppose the bill as they should, they oppose the loss of federal funding that could come from it. We have a shot at a really good chance at having these bills die this year. And it's awful that we have to have these come back year after year, and we have to find ways to challenge them at every turn. I mean, fairness is fairness. All men are created equal, all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, that's not what everyone believes in. So we have to keep fighting.
Right. Well, and I think one of those bills that they're trying to pass, I think they had some sort of fiscal note attached to it because they're anticipating the lawsuits that are going to happen. So they know that this is going to run against federal law. They know that the lawsuits are going to come, and they're fine with spending millions of dollars frivolously to fight these kinds of things, which is not very fiscally conservative, in my opinion. But Eric, did you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, with the fiscal note, being the old Democrat in the party that I am, I'm the old of the young Democrats now, which is fun for me now. My cousin Lincoln Davis, who used to be a congressman back in my home district, said to me when I was growing up, they call themselves conservative. I want to know what they're trying to conserve. They're definitely not trying to conserve money, because they are setting $100 bills on fire every time they pass one of these bills, not only for the state economy, but for small business who are going to be affected by the next corporation that doesn't move here because we don't know how to act in the legislature, or the next convention that doesn't come to Nashville because we don't know how to act in the legislature. Like, our legislature is not only costing us money on the state budget for Herbert Slattery, the Attorney General, they're wasting money for small businesses, and it's bad for business. I mean, so bad that the LGBT Chamber just released a list of, I think it was nearly 200 or over 200. It was somewhere in that neighborhood of businesses that have signed on against the slate of hate, not just the anti-trans sports bill that we're seeing that got fast-tracked for some weird reason, but all of it, because everybody knows that being open to all is good for business. And it's just simply hurting us. Now, also, I really want to harp on this, because we do see, as someone who's worked with a lot of corporate end LGBTQ policy, who's worked with a lot of corporate folks who give money to organizations that I've represented currently or in the past, I also really want to talk about this and really talk to these folks who are at places like Amazon, at places like Dollar General, Cracker Barrel, folks like that who show up at Pride and are wonderful, wonderful sponsors of our events and great friends to the community, but also turn right back around and give money to folks like Bill Lee and these folks who are keeping the slate of hate alive, and not doing anything other than signing on to the Chamber's release, which is great, but there needs to be more pressure added from those companies because they listen to you guys. Mm-hmm. So that is my plug to the businesses who really know that this is bad for business. Y'all have really got to step up right now because we need you.
Yeah. Well, isn't that what happened in North Carolina after they passed that anti-trans bill? I forgot. That was been a few years, but
I'm happy to repeat on history on that because they passed a transgender bathroom bill, an anti-trans bathroom bill in North Carolina. I think that was 2015 or so. HRC went in and got rid of the governor because they allowed that to happen. Also, PayPal pulled out of a big contract. They lost several concerts. They lost several conventions. The NCAA moved to the playoffs that year. I think we got the playoffs that year, honestly. That might have been the year they started coming to Nashville. Like, it's just absolutely bad for business when we're passing bills like this. We have got to get back to business. We've got to focus on the things that actually will help Tennesseans. And honestly, let's work on things that will help LGBTQ Tennesseans. Like, we are so far behind in healthcare. We really have got to expand Medicaid for all kinds of reasons, including for trans folks who need access to healthcare.
Right. And just like you said, this is, targeting vulnerable people. You're targeting school children at a formidable age. This isn't a situation. They try to paint this, a picture of, oh, this roided up guy is now competing in, female athletes, competing in female sports. It's not quite like that at all. But when you pass these kind of bills, you're sending these kids a signal, right? You're sending trans athletes a signal that they are not wanted. And that is absolutely the wrong thing to do, especially with young people during their formidable years. And, as we know, suicide is already pretty high for LGBTQ youth in this country, in this state. And at a time when local leaders should be compassionate and should be trying to work for the people of this state, they want to discriminate. They want to push back for money or for red meat for their base or for whatever reason. I think there was some victories today, not as far as the slate of hate bills, but there was. Me and Luke were discussing this earlier. The bill to remove the judge in Davidson County failed, which is great. Rutherford County representative introduced that, Tim Rudd. He's a real piece of work. And there's another success thing today. Oh, the bust, Nathan Bedford Forrest bust, has been voted to be taken out of the Capitol. I think it's still got another hump before it actually makes it out of the Capitol. But, there's plenty of things that these legislators could be working on that actually helps people. And like George was saying, they're popular. They're 60% or more of the public want these kinds of bills. But our state is asleep at the wheel. Now, we do have a question here, and I'm going to ask George this question. This person is asking, Kelly, our friend Kelly is asking, are we sure that funding would be lost if these bills passed? So, definitely they would be as far as the lawsuits go, right? But George, you were saying that federal funding can be lost, right?
Yes. To be eligible for federal funds, you have to meet certain criteria, and every single recipient of federal funds must be compliant with civil rights and civil liberties protections pursuant to the federal government. Now, of course, you can be on your own and not adhere to those requirements, but if you were to receive federal dollars and to use federal dollars in accordance with federal programming, you must. And the Obama administration used to regularly withdraw or threaten to withdraw federal funds for non-compliance. However, the Trump administration, of course, they had a different interpretation of the Civil Rights Act, their EEOC, their Office of Civil Rights Programming in the Justice Department, their executive branch. But the Biden administration, like I was saying yesterday, even with releasing the executive order on equality, has shown that they intend to support a more traditionalist view of the Civil Rights Act, that it includes everyone, and a more Obama-era view of the Civil Rights Act insofar as gender is a sex discrimination issue. And if we were to pass any of these measures, we're speaking with our local district offices who have been in contact with executive branch functions. We're pretty sure that they're going to withdraw federal funds again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what's happening.
Now, I will say this. They've never had to do that because once Tennessee, which is a very federally dependent state, over 60% of our budget comes from the federal government.
Right.
Sometimes 80 and 90%, depending on which program you look at, if you look at it from a programmatic slice. Once we realize that those federal funds are in jeopardy and our ability to even continue operations, is at risk, they usually either withdraw those bills or the governor doesn't sign them in action, or however they die. So going back to that question, that's extremely likely this time around. We're just waiting on ink to pen to paper on that right now. Like I said, it's very consistent to have happened in years past, and it's largely how those bills fail in Republican legislatures throughout the country.
Right. Well,
And one thing we're seeing,
yes.
just overall, is a lot of these representatives are just like not really caring as much about these fiscal costs because
Mhm.
they're like a lot of times what like especially with what Eric was talking about, the businesses and everything, those are benefiting like major urban cities. So one of the main things we're working on at the Tennessee Equality Project is just trying to increase awareness and make sure like everyday people are standing up and saying, hey, we don't want these pieces of legislation. Like that's the main thing like we need to do to in order to defeat these kind of bills.
Well, these kind of bills have been going on now for, the GOP has held a supermajority for 10, 11 years now. They started doing this, right? They started doing that shortly after they had, national traditional marriage defense act or something silly like that. And they had some other things, but then Openfield, the Supreme Court case, I forgot what it's called exactly, that legalizes same-sex marriage, became the law of the land, and they changed their game up a little bit. Instead of going after same-sex marriage, they're going after transgender people, whether it's, a silly law about bathrooms or now it's about athletes. But George is right. That's a violation of Title IX. And during the Trump years, they were fine to let some stuff go. But now that Biden is in office, that might be a different story. And we take more money from the federal government than we give in. So that would not be a great place to be at. But does anyone want to talk about what they can do? I did, hear from Eric about, possibly putting pressure on businesses. So I'd like to hear more of that if you want to talk about it. But Luke, do you want to talk a little bit more about like the Tennessee Equality Project and what their plans are and what they're up to and what they're doing and how people can get involved with them?
Of course. So the main thing we're working on is connecting with the legislators. So we have a whole lobbying team trying to talk behind the scenes. But the main thing we need to do is have a presence. Actually contact your representatives. So you can easily go to tnep.org and we have all of our upcoming strategies, like all our missions. Like I know we encourage people to make phone calls so that they can have a voicemail that they hear and then they can put a face to the issue that's being talked about. And then we also have email campaigns, and these emails, they go out like with your name on them, and they do a great job of showing like, hey, we're in opposition to this hateful legislation. And while it may not initially change their mind, it does end up building kind of a rapport that ends up having a long-term effect. And one of the more, like, obviously we want people to take action on these specific bills, but one of the main things we can do to actually make a difference is get involved. Like we have TEP chapters across the state that are actively trying to make connections with these representatives, because while we can talk about like whether or not like to elect new representatives and wanting to have different people who are more accepting and affirming, right now we have the representatives we have. So half the battle is just making these connections and showing them that everyday people are able to get involved and everyday people like can have an impact with their legislators and care about these issues. So you can definitely reach me at info@tnep.org and we can talk about getting involved. But the main challenge that we're seeing is just making sure these representatives see everyday Tennesseans who care about advancing equality. That's kind of my spiel, but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Eric, I want to go back to you real quick.
Sure.
Because you mentioned Cracker Barrel and you mentioned some other companies. I remember it was not too long ago, maybe it's been a couple of years, there was a brouhaha around Cracker Barrel, and Cracker Barrel came out with a statement that was very strong that said, we do not discriminate against LGBTQ people, which was awesome. Everybody was celebrating Cracker Barrel, except Cracker Barrel is only that way because they got the pantsuit off of them 20 years ago. I'm pretty certain that's the story, right? So, I mean,
and it's
sometimes
not just that they got the pantsuit off of them, because when that happened, I don't remember what exactly happened with that lawsuit. I remember they got sued. I don't think anything came of it because it was legal what they did. They fired a gay employee. I'm pretty sure that was the case. I would have to look back for sure, but something along that line. They fired someone. That was legal when they did it. What it took was groups like Tennessee Equality Project, groups like the Human Rights Campaign getting in there and working with that organization and saying, hey, you can't do this. This is wrong. It's bad for your business. And we've seen great progress with them over the years. They have gone from firing gay people publicly and proudly to now showing up at Pride, proudly supporting us. And the reference you're referring to, there was a pastor in Cleveland, Tennessee, who had scheduled a get-together meeting on Facebook at the local Cracker Barrel in Cleveland, and they canceled. They said, no, you're not meeting here. That's not happening.
Good.
That's what we've gone to with Cracker Barrel, and that's what good work and good advocacy work will do. You know, the Human Rights Campaign is who I'm still on the local committee. I'm no longer a governor, but that's what we do at HRC. It's what we've been doing for years, and we go into these companies, we say, hey, fix this, or, you know, you're going to lose business. And they usually listen to us, thank goodness. So something I really would call on, though, for these businesses, again, and if you really want to reach them, you know, blow up some social medias and say, hey, this is wrong. To reach out to Governor Lee. You've got a personal connection to him, more so than we do, I guess. As a business, reach out to him and say, hey, this is wrong and you need to fix this.
Yeah. Well, you know, the point is that, you know, some of these businesses aren't just going to do the right thing. Sometimes they need to be pushed to do that. And luckily, Cracker Barrel had been pushed years ago to reject that sort of thing, which is great. But, you know, we do know businesses that are not only working with groups like that, but contribute money to them as well. And so looking at some sort of pressure campaign on them is a smart way to try to combat this stuff. But, you know, I got involved with state and local politics like 6-7 years ago. I feel like TEP has been around since then. And of course, they were strong, but they've gotten stronger. All of these groups have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, right? HRC and even, you know, TEP. So that's a great thing. Our coalition is growing. And there's a lot of people who don't want this kind of thing. So we can push back on this kind of stuff. George, I want to ask you another question that we have here. We have kind of a complicated question. So I'm going to ask our other policy wonk. We got 3 of them, I guess, on here. But I want to ask you, George, about this. Our friend Eric has a question about have legislators remarked on the SCOTUS ruling in Bostock that Title VII protects LGBTQ workers in employment? The current administration, along with the lower courts, have applied that precedent to anti-LGBTQ discrimination more broadly. So do you have any insight on this, George?
Absolutely. And yes, I'm very familiar with what Eric's referencing. Unfortunately, our legislators, public, at least in their public-facing rhetoric-filled portions of their day, they live in a alternate reality. So, you know, the real world, the one that the parallel universe that the rest of us live in, sometimes catches up to them. No, they have not. People remind them of it all the time. It's been brought up in certain talking points and in a couple of committee conversations. But, you know, they just kind of, when they hear something they don't agree with or they don't like or they don't think is real, even though they know it's real, they kind of just go around it. So you don't hear any real acknowledgement of that, but that's a hard truth that will hit them in any court case. So it's very relevant, and thank you, Eric Hughes, for bringing that up. But it's they like to face those truths in the judicial chambers rather than the legislative ones.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, like I said, we've got lots of problems here in Tennessee, and they are not focusing on the right ones. I know that things have gotten better technically for some LGBTQ folks in Tennessee. I know Knoxville City and I think Chattanooga City did this too, but I think the voters voted against it. I'm not sure about Memphis, but I know Nashville for sure. And that's countywide. That's in Davidson County. There's benefits. You can get benefits for workers and same sex partners. How much do you know about that kind of stuff? I mean, that seems to be kind of a growing trend in the bigger cities to want to provide these kind of benefits to same sex couples. But is that a growing trend? Do you see that happening in more cities?
Well, it's definitely growing, and HRC, I have to give them huge credit. They've led the push to do that. I was on Memphis Mayor AC Warden's LGBT policy task force, which was basically an interdisciplinary work group of interested city officials who were trying to improve our HRC scorecard numbers. HRC, they put out a list every year of things that cities need to be doing, as well as they grade them on the things that cities have done. Mayor Warden, he lost to a Republican challenger, unfortunately, but when we were in there, I said it's a Republican challenger, I meant that. He did what he Mayor Warden was trying to improve those scorecard numbers. So we had a non-discrimination ordinance for city employees, which is the most you can do in Tennessee because the state preempted. Municipalities and local governments can't do that for all businesses. We established certain protections for workers and employees, and it seems like the big four. I'm not sure if the big six metroplexes have done that, but I know 4 out of 6 for sure have. And in that, since my time in municipal government, that ended in 2015. The federal government stepped in with marriage equality, which requires spousal health insurance and requires certain like FMLA time. These were things that were optional and needed to be legislated at the time, but now any spouse, because marriage equality was enacted, can take time off to take care of their other. They are required to have health insurance and benefit and pension related protections pursuant to whatever the city's plan is for the non-LGBT workers. So in that, some things have had to happen federally, but I am noticing that those smaller things like there are some ancillary protections like and I don't mean to say ancillary, but the larger things like wages and things like that. But you have gender neutral restrooms. Those were legislated in both Memphis and Shelby County within the past 3 years, and that's something that was not available before. They have gender neutral athletic programs and gender affirming athletic programs within Memphis and Shelby County. So I definitely know that there continues to be more that can be done, and there is more that's being done. I definitely have to give a shout out to even Republican mayor. He's not LGBT unfriendly. Mayor Jim Strickland, Democratic Mayor Lee Harris, Democratic Mayor Andy Burke, Democratic Mayor Cooper in Nashville Davidson County. They are looking for those gaps, and they're aggressively filling them. So looking towards other municipalities, other cities, other local governments, other special governments, other school districts. They're in some senses considered municipal governments. And looking at making sure that all of those are equality affirming in every facet of business and in transactionary life. That's something that we continue to look at and examine.
Yeah, great. Thank you, George, for that. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. Does anyone have any final thoughts? We definitely want to promote some of the things that we wanted. So we will go into promoting here in a second. But Luke, you have anything else you'd like to share about this?
Yeah, just generally, I think one of the hardest things of getting engaged is most of the time, even myself included, before I started talking to my representatives, we hold them to such a level that it almost seems like they're unapproachable, like we can't just talk to them. But whenever I actually started having these conversations, they were much more receptive than I ever thought they might be. And especially just understanding, like building that relationship it's so fundamental to the work we do. And I just want to encourage everyone know that you can talk to your representatives. Know that they will listen. They may not agree with everything, but it's important to be having those conversations. So I just want to encourage everyone to get involved and make sure you're building a relationship, because when they see us in person, when they actually have to look at our faces, when they start realizing, oh, there are LGBTQ plus people in Tennessee, in my district, then it becomes real and you can start making advances. And that's generally like what I'm just hoping everyone, yeah, please. I see Matt put my email in there. It's actually tnep.org, but I'm close enough. One of the main things is just like we'd love to get you engaged, and with that, just please get involved, because that's how we actually make a difference and prevent this legislation from passing.
Yeah, thank you. And you can go to the TNEP website. Go to tnep.com, and you can see all these bills come up. And you can also, there's actually, little links that you can click to action items to try to tell your legislators that you do not approve of this. So, there are things that you can do. This is not, hopeless. And like you said, our legislators, you need to build a relationship with them and tell them that this is not okay, that this is not acceptable at all. So thank you so much, Luke. And that's at org. I'm so sorry.
You're fine. Here's my title, now the email. Come on, Matt. Yeah. What's going on? I'm just playing with you.
Please go to the Tennessee Equality Project website. They're doing great work with that. Eric, would you like to promote the HRC?
Sure, the campaign. That's hrc.org, and we work nationwide. We have chapters all over the country. We are the largest LGBTQ advocacy organization in the country. That's who we are. So if you want to make a difference nationally, which is usually very helpful, because a lot of the state preemption bills that they like to put up, a lot of the bad bills usually have to have some federal pushback. So it's really got to come from both angles. So I have loved working with HRC from that aspect to bring in the federal government and to bring in the federal resources to defeat the slate of hate here year after year. We work really well together with TEP. So so I'm really excited about that. I'm also going to plug this to add on to what Luke was saying about talking to your representatives. Harvey Milk, in his brilliance, always said that we had to come out. You have to come out so they'll know that they love a gay person, that they love a trans person. Because the first thing I think of whenever I hear some of these representatives speak on these issues, watching the floor debate is some of the most depressing, sad conversations I've ever heard. These people have never met a trans person. They do not know gay people. Mm-hmm. We need to get in their face.
Yes.
Not aggressively, for when this becomes a Republican talking point going against January 6th, but we need to let them know we exist. Because they don't, clearly. Or if you know a trans person and love a trans person, you're not going to do this. You're not going to promote hate like this. If you will sit down and figure out who in your life doesn't know that you're gay, doesn't know that you're trans, doesn't know that you're in the community somehow, those legislators have got to learn who their constituents are. And every one of them has LGBTQ constituents. And every one of you who are sitting in Ken Yeager's district in Roane County, who's sitting in Jeremy Faison's district over in Sevierville, who's sitting in whoever, your representative needs to know your name.
Yeah.
And every time one of these slate of hate bills come up, they need to be thinking, what's it going to do to Sam in my district? What's it going to do to Emily in my district? What's it going to do to my constituents? They need to know, and they need to have a face with who they are hurting.
Right. Well, thank you for all your work on that, and thank you for your work with the LGBTQ caucus with the TNYD. We are growing as a state group, and we've got more people coming. But you should join today because you'd be working with awesome people like Eric Patton. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank
George,
you.
before we go, I want you to tell us anything you want to tell us, but I also want you to plug because you've got a live stream tomorrow on this channel, right? Is that tomorrow? I'm sorry if it is. If it isn't.
Oh no, it's tomorrow.
Okay, yeah. Tell us about your policy live stream tomorrow.
Well, we have a standing committee on policy, and it's meeting bi-weekly through the end of the legislative session. And tomorrow we're meeting just to do an update and an open discussion, kind of just like this. Take questions from anyone regarding bills of a wide variety that are going through the Tennessee legislature. I definitely appreciate this conversation. We have a really, really strong update on what's going on with the slate of hate and some things that are going on here. But, we have a lot of other things to discuss. Nathan Bedford Forrest, it's looking like it crossed the first hurdle to get down. We've got a lot of host of bad bills that are coming up. But I definitely don't want to take this time to talk about that. I definitely want you to come tomorrow at 6 p.m., same bad time, same bad channel. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., TNYD Standing Committee on Policy. But I also want to close out by saying that the average Tennessean is also the average Tennessee political donor. The average Tennessee political donor is also the average Tennessee voter. The average Tennessee voter is also the average bellwether of issues important to Tennesseans. Unfortunately, our legislators, and I can speak for every elected official across the political spectrum, they often live in a protective bubble. They live in a social media vacuum, and they live kind of amongst the people that they normally deal with. I would echo what everyone else said on this call. Reach out to your elected officials, but don't be shy about telling them, I'm George Boynton. I live in X district. I live in Y place. I voted in the last election, plan to vote in the upcoming election. Here's what's important to me. And again, we don't have to be aggressive about it. I mean, that's just big facts. And sometimes we see them at the grocery store, we see them at the football game, but they are also required, and some are better at it than others, to see us at work. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out and let them know that in every way you're an average Tennessean, and that you are for certain issues and against other issues, and that's going to go a really long way. They, believe it or not, they do listen to people that they hear from. I'm outing my elected official, the one I am employed by, but I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. When he knows that constituents say something, and I've worked for multiple, so I know they all feel the same way. He takes that feedback. He takes it home with him in his mind, and he asks about it the next day and the next day, and asks how many people feel this way. And I promise you, a lot of what he does is guided by that public sentiment, and a lot of what all of them do are guided by public sentiment. But make sure, like I say, you tell them that who you are, where you live, they represent you, that you vote and that you donate, and just you want to share with them some of your thoughts, as they vote, and take actions that are representative of you. So that's, and also tomorrow 6, please make the policy call. We'll talk about a wide range of issues, and thank you, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you, George. You made a lot of great points right there. We've got some friends here who want to say, hey, real quick, our friend Kelly did say, thanks, everyone. Harvey Milk was right about that. And Eric Hughes said, we need to be vocal for those who can't or don't want to come out for one reason or another.
That's very true.
Yeah. And our friend Lindsay Smith, who is Davidson County, head of the Davidson County Young Democrats, she said, make
Lindsay.
sure.
I had to give a shout out.
No, it's okay. Make sure the elected officials know your name. And something, you just reminded me of, George, is that if your elected official isn't working with you, if they're not willing to listen to you, there is a way to possibly get rid of that elected official. And that is, finding a candidate or running yourself. If you don't think you're qualified, you might be surprised.
You think some of those are qualified up there? Oh, honey, no.
Listen, I'll tell you, I wanted to run for state house after I saw Jeremy Durham and what he did in the state house. I said, oh, these guys, you know, some of them are not professional people at all. Anyway, we'll save that conversation for another time. But next week, the Davidson County Young Dems are having, her name is Kayla Parker. I think she's the head of a group called Organized Tennessee. And she is a very exciting guest. That's going to happen on Monday night. We can link that into the comments. So please register for that Zoom. Lindsay also wanted to give you all some love. So she's awesome. And like George said, we got a policy call, 6 p.m. tomorrow on this station, on this channel. Please stay tuned to that. There's some very good information in that. Sign up with the Tennessee Equality Project, TNEP.org. And
Bingo.
And you can read all about the Slate of Hate bills, and you can do something about it too, or you can just join the Tennessee Equality Project. The more the merrier. And Eric, with Human Rights Campaign and all kinds of stuff he's doing. Thank you so much, all three of you, for joining us today. This was a great panel. I think we got some good info out there. And thanks again for joining me, and let's do it again very soon.
Perfect. Have a good one.
Thanks, sir. Bye, everybody. It's good to see everybody.
Same here.
Bye.
All right. Y'all have a good night.